Homeostasis is hard work. Organisms and the cells within them have to grow and develop, move materials around, build new molecules, and respond to environmental changes. What powers so much activity, and where does the power come from? Why is ATP useful to cells? ATP can easily release and store energy by breaking and reforming the bonds between its phosphate groups. This characteristic of ATP makes it exceptionally useful as a basic energy source for all cells. Energy is the ability to do work. Your cells are busy using energy to build new molecules, contract muscles, and carry out active transport. Without the ability to obtain and use energy, life would cease to exist. One of the most important compounds that cells use to store and release energy is adenosine triphosphate, also known as ATP. ATP consists of adenine, a 5-carbon sugar called ribose, and 3 phosphate groups. Adenosine diphosphate, or ADP, looks almost like ATP except that it has 2 phosphate groups instead of 3. ADP contains some energy, but not as much as ATP. Energy available, it can store small amounts of it by adding phosphate groups to ADP, producing ATP. ADP is like a rechargeable battery that powers the machinery of a cell. Cells can release the energy stored in ATP by breaking the bonds between the 2nd and 3rd phosphate groups. Because a cell can add or subtract these phosphate groups, it has an efficient way of storing and releasing energy as needed. Using biochemical energy. One way cells use the energy provided by ATP is to carry out active transport. Many cell membranes contain sodium-potassium pumps. ATP provides the energy that keeps these pumps working, maintaining a balance of ions on both sides of the cell membrane. ATP powers movement, providing the energy for motor proteins to contract muscle and power the movement of cilia and flagella. Energy from ATP powers the synthesis of proteins and responses to chemical signals at the cell surface. ATP is not a good molecule for storing large amounts of energy over the long term. It is more efficient for cells to keep only a small supply of ATP on hand. Cells can regenerate ATP from ADP as needed by using the energy in foods like glucose. Heterotrophs and autotrophs. What happens during the process of photosynthesis? In the process of photosynthesis, plants convert the energy of sunlight into chemical energy stored in the bonds of carbohydrates. Organisms that obtain food by consuming other living organisms are known as heterotrophs. Some heterotrophs get their food by eating plants. Other heterotrophs, such as this cheetah, obtain food from plants indirectly by feeding on plant-eating animals. Still other heterotrophs, such as mushrooms, obtain food by decomposing other organisms. Organisms that make their own food are called autotrophs.
Autotroph. Organism that is able to capture energy from sunlight or chemicals and use it to produce its own food from inorganic compounds, also called a producer.
Plants, algae, and some bacteria are able to use light energy from the sun to produce food. The process by which autotrophs use the energy of sunlight to produce high-energy carbohydrates that can be used for food is known as photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis. Process used by autotrophs to capture light energy and use it to power chemical reactions that convert carbon dioxide in water into oxygen and energy-rich carbohydrates such as sugars and starches.
This has been an overview of Section 8.1 for our Chapter 8 Photosynthesis, and we will continue with 8.2 the next time we meet. If you have not read that section, please read it. Review this summary and then read that section. Take notes when you read so that you can review your notes for study before a quiz or a test.